Hello, children. Hope you're having a good day. In the previous podcast, we learned about the differences between caste societies and tribal societies. We also got to know about the various activities practiced by the tribal people, like jhum or shifting cultivation, hunting gathering, herding animals, and settled cultivation. Today, we would assess the impact of colonial rule on the lives of tribal people. Like the other sections of the Indian society, the lives of the tribal groups also underwent tremendous changes under the British colonial rule. Let us see how. The first change was in the powers of the tribal chiefs. Before the arrival of the British, in many areas, the tribal chiefs were important people. They enjoyed a certain amount of economic power and had the right to administer and control their territories. In some places, they had their own police and decided on the local rules of land and forest management. However, under the British rule, the functions and powers of the tribal chiefs changed considerably. They were allowed to keep their land titles over a group of villages and rent out lands, but they lost much of their administrative power and were forced to follow laws made by British officials in India. They also had to pay tribute to the British and discipline the tribal groups on behalf of the British. Thus, the tribal chiefs lost the authority they had earlier enjoyed amongst their people and were unable to fulfill their traditional functions. The second change was in the lives of shifting cultivators. The British were uncomfortable with groups who moved about and did not have a fixed home. They wanted tribal groups to settle down and become peasant cultivators. Settled peasants were easier to control and administer than people who were always on the move. The British also wanted a regular revenue source for the state. So they introduced land settlements, that is, they measured the land, defined the rights of each individual to that land, and fixed the revenue demand for the state. Some peasants were declared landowners, others tenants. The tenants were to pay rent to the landowner, who in turn paid revenue to the state. The third way in which the tribal people experienced changes under the British rule was when the British introduced new forest laws. The life of tribal groups was directly connected to the forest. So, changes in forest laws had a considerable effect on tribal lives. The British extended their control over all forests and declared that forests were state property. Some forests were classified as reserve forests for they produced timber which the British wanted. In these forests, people were not allowed to move freely, practice jhum cultivation, collect fruits, or hunt animals. Many tribals were therefore forced to move to other areas in search of work and livelihood. The fourth change that affected tribal lives was because of the monetary interests of the traders and moneylenders. During the 19th century, tribal groups found that traders and moneylenders were coming into the forest more often, wanting to buy forest produce, offering cash loans, and asking them to work for wages. Let us consider the case of silk growers. In the 18th century, Indian silk was in demand in European markets. The fine quality of Indian silk was highly valued, and exports from India increased rapidly. As the market expanded, East India Company officials tried to encourage silk production to meet the growing demand. Hazaribagh, in present day Jharkhand, was an area where the Santhal tribe reared cocoons. The traders dealing in silk sent in their agents who gave loans to the tribal people and collected the cocoons. The growers were paid rupees 3 to rupees 4 for 1,000 cocoons. These cocoons were then exported to Gaya in present day Bihar, where they were sold at 5 times the price. The middlemen who arranged deals between the exporters and silk growers made huge profits. The silk growers earned very little. Thus, many tribal groups saw the market and the traders as their main enemies. The fifth change was brought in the lives of the tribals who worked as daily wage laborers. The plight of the tribals who had to go far away from their homes in search of work was even worse. From the late 19th century, tea plantations started coming up and mining became an important industry. Tribals were recruited in large numbers to work in the tea plantations of Assam and in the coal mines of Jharkhand. They were recruited through contractors who paid them miserably low wages and prevented them from returning home. That is all, children. In the next podcast, I would discuss about a significant tribal rebellion led by Birsa Munda against the oppressive British colonial rule. Thank you.